All right, Bechorot, Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Bet. The question I want to pose is, what defines our legacy? Okay, so we come into this world, we live 70, 80, 120 years, and then we leave this world. That's the way that it was created. What lives on past us? And so, in the modern Western world, right, so we believe in fame, riches, various other things, and obviously Torah has a bit of a different take on what our legacy truly is. So of course we have the traditional idea that the mitzvot that you do, they give you olam haba, and et cetera, et cetera. But I'd like to actually explore a series of Gemorot that are a bit, that give some concrete examples. It's not clear if it's meant literally or figuratively, we'll see. And then at the end, I'll kind of try to tie it together to a vort I came up with a few months ago that I like, and it's my vort, so it's a good. Anyway, all right. As follows. And one more question to pose before we start. One thing that's a bit strange about the Gemara and Talmud is how obsessed they are with names. Right? Hi, welcome. Come take a seat and take some snacks. Yep.
Not necessarily in that order.
One thing that's surprising about the way Chazal record everything is they're obsessed with names. And he said in the name of him, and some say he said it in the name of him, and it's machloka between these people. And there's such, I don't know what percent, I assume somebody did the research, what percent of the Talmud is just names, or the word amar. It's a very substantial percentage. What is such a big deal? I mean, isn't the idea that matters? Why are we so obsessed with names? So, Imam Bechorot and Daf Lamed Aleph Bet. Rabbi Idi Sarsedu Rav Sheshet have a Sham'amine. Okay, so Rav Sheshet was a great Amorah. He had an attendant named Rabbi Idi. So one time Rabbi Idi heard a teaching from Rav Sheshet. Azal Amra Beit Madrasha v'lo Amra Mishmei. And so Rabbi Idi went and said that teaching in the Beit Midrash, and he didn't say it in the name of his teacher, Rav Sheshet. Shamar Rav Sheshet ikpid. Rav Sheshet heard that the teaching had been said, but not in his name, and he got angry about it. Amar man de akitz li aktzei akrava. May the one who has stung me be stung by a scorpion. In other words, he's cursing his attendant, Rabbi Idi, for not saying a teaching in his name and saying, he stung me, he should be stung as well. Rav Sheshet, my nafka le'mina. Why does Rav Sheshet care? What's the difference? Why does he? The teaching was said over. Why is he so upset that it wasn't said in his name? Is it because of his kavod? Right? Damav Yuda Marav. My dichtiv. Why does it say? There's a pasuk in Tehillim. It says Agura ba'olcha olamim, ba'olecha olamim. Or it says in Tehillim, I will dwell in your tents forever. And it says olamim is forever, but it's also multiple worlds. So the Gemara asks, can a person live in two worlds? Ela Amar David, Ribono Shel Olam. Right, David said, Master of the universe, Yomru davar shmoa mipio ba'olam hazeh. May people say things in my name in this world. That's how I'll be able to inherit olamim, multiple worlds, that even in olam haba, after I die, people will still be saying my teachings or my Torah in this world. And that's why I'll be able to dwell in two worlds at once. Kol tamid chacham sheomrim davar shmoa mipив ba'olam hazeh, siftotav dovבות b'kever. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says any scholar who after he dies, people say his Torah in his name in this world, his lips move in the grave. What is the meaning of this pasuk? This is pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Dovev siftei shanim is the lips of the sleeping are moving. It moves the lips of the sleeping, and it's talking about wine. So kekoma shel anavim. The comparison is like a cluster of grapes. Ma koma shel anavim kevan de'adam nogea bo dovev. Just as with a cluster of grapes, if a person touches it, the grape bursts open and the liquids squirt everywhere. Af talmidei chachamim kevan she'adam אומר דבר שמועה מפיו דובבות שפתיו בקבר. So too with the scholar, when a person says something in their name, so their lips move in the grave. Okay? So it's an interesting imagery of the lips moving in the grave, but the idea is that they have something that lives on after they die.
Where's the thing taken? כל אומר דבר בשם אמור מביא גאולה לעולם?
Yeah, that's also in the Talmud.
So I don't know if this is also right. If we talk about it when we quote people with like Rashi or whatever, you don't say said. You say Rashi said it's active, it's current, even though they're not alive. clothes, it's very much, I mean, it might be the English thing, but it's very much only the Torah that can do that. If you quote it in like a scientific source, you never say it says.
Okay.
You say, it says from so and so, it's like it's a current thing.
Because you're keeping them alive.
Right.
Very good. Right.
Or that you're also affirming the thing. Well, you think of the first Mishnah of Masech Tavot of Moshe Kibet. That means the chain of passing on. It needs to be, there's an importance to the links of the chain. So you need to be mentioned, so to speak. Although if you think about it, there's other, especially like in the Islamic world, where really they have crazy things where there's a whole science, quote unquote, of people who said what and whose name and how ironclad is the saying itself. We don't have that, but I guess it's the closest thing to it.
What do you mean by that? In Islam,
there's something called, I know we're kind of all veering off, but there's something called in the Islamic world, something called isnad and maten. Isnad means they have the equivalent of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, where it's called these six writings, or it's called in Arabic they say kutub basita, which is if you like the equivalent of Shasidra Mishnah. So you have there a whole idea of a whole line of you need to get as closer you get to the quote unquote prophet,
right,
then it's considered more ironclad. It's considered they're out of these six writings, they're the two that are most reliable. Then somewhere in the middle, and then they're the ones where their chain of even passing on the stuff is like all screwed up. So
wow.
You have, and the science behind it is called maten, which means really people literally what they did with their entire lives was just to research how accurate or how who did that person actually say or bring the right story in the name of, and pass it on to the next and down the chain. So it's not that close, if you like, as that, but it's getting there.
Why do you know so much about the Muslim religion?
I learned
Middle
Eastern studies.
You get the second one. Why do you know so much about? This is stuff.
Ignore me. Yeah, but yeah.
What? This is a Jewish religious year, right? Not come to the right shit.
You'll be surprised how many stuff they're mentioned in ours and also in theirs. There's a text called.
Yeah, but they came after us. That's not surprising.
Well, yeah. Let's not really get into it. It's a story.
Sidebar.
Yeah.
But thank you.
All right.
Okay. All right. So let me refocus my thoughts after that. Okay. The Talmud Yerushalmi. It also discusses the same drasha. It says it a bit. It's the same idea, but it has different names. Okay, so it says if you just skip to the end of the first line. Shneimar agura ba'olamcha olamit echaseh b'setek knafecha sela. That's the pasuk from Tehillim. Chiyalta al da'ato shel David sheichai v'kayam lo'olamim. The question's a bit different here. Is it possible that David HaMelech thought that he would live forever? Elakach omer David lifnei Kadosh Baruch Hu ribono shel olam ezkeh shiu dvarai nemarim b'vatech nesiyot v'vateh midoshot. That may it be your will that my words will be said in the shuls and in the houses of study. Shimon ben Nizira b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak Amar kol tamid chacham sheomrim dvar halacha mipив ba'olam hazeh sfatav urachashot imo b'kever. So this person Shimon ben Nizira, so the son of the Nazir, said in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, any student or any scholar or any tamid chacham who says where they say a dvar halacha or a teaching of Torah in his name in this world, his lips move in the grave, etc., etc. So first of all, I just want to emphasize that in the Talmud Bavli, in the Talmud Yerushalmi, you have the same teaching about how when a teaching is said in someone's name, it keeps them alive, and that teaching is said in the names of two completely different people.
Changing.
Huh?
In Yerushalmi, they say about the Torah. David Eskironi, B'tek Nesiyot, B'tek Midrashot. Here it says Dvar Shmu'a.
Nachon.
And they also say Rochashot Imo B'kever. They don't say his dick just moving. He's moving within. Like he becomes alive.
I understand. That's true. That's a good diuk. But you would agree that the teaching is the same idea.
Yeah.
It's there's a subtle difference, but yeah. Okay. This idea comes up also and is brought as a proof from a different pasuk in the Midrash Tanchuma Yoladenu on Parashat Ki Tisa. So there's a pasuk in Kohelet where it says "V'asava le'ashir enenu meniach lo lishon." So first of all, I love this pasuk. This pasuk means the wealth of or the fullness of a rich person doesn't let him sleep. Right? Because if you're rich, you're always worried about your finances. That's the pasuk in Kohelet. So then the Midrash asks, Mahu v'aday maniach lo lishon. The Midrash says, what are you talking about? Of course his wealth lets him sleep. Shekol mishu saveh, anyone who's full, hama'achal mevi'eh lidei shina. Right? That if he has enough money to buy food, then he's got a full stomach, and then when you have a full stomach, then it's easier for you to sleep. In other words, it's kind of rejecting the premise of the pasuk. So Amar lahem, Shlomo Melech said to them, Bashirei Torah ani medaber. I'm talking about those who are rich, not in monetary, but in Torah. Okay, just sit. Thank you. V'lo bashirei mamon, and not those who are wealthy with money. Ketzad, how? Haya adam gadol ve'ashir b'Torah limed talmidim harbe v'rebetz Torah barabim v'tzava min haTorah. So you had a great person. He was very rich in Torah. He taught a lot of students. And he expounded Torah amongst the people, and he was full from Torah. Af al pi shehu met, even if he died, ein talmidim shehemid manichim lo lishon. Right, the students that he had don't let him sleep. And it was a permanent sleep, not at night, but they don't let him die without a memory because he taught them Torah. Rather, they come and they learn all these things. So they come and they teach the halachot in his name, and they quote things in his name. Okay, so this idea is also brought as an interesting way to read the pasuk from Kohelet. The wealth of a rich person doesn't let him sleep. It means that the wealth of Torah that a rich person expounds to his students don't let him sleep forever without an ongoing memory of his name through the Torah that's quoted in his name.
Well, you could also say that if someone is mentioned, and he's quote unquote not with us anymore,
right?
As if it brings him brings him back to this world.
That's the idea, exactly.
So because there's I don't remember which Gemara it is, but the famous story where I think it was Ravashi who said, "Hayom nadun bechaverenu Menashe," where he speaks of the king, and he like brings him back, and then he shows in his dream, and it says, "Why do you call me as if I'm your friend?" And then he said, "Okay, if you're really that big, can you tell me a chidush of Torah?" So his answer was, "Okay, I'll ask you this question: where do you cut the challah? And for Shabbat, where do you start cutting?" So the answer was, so Rashi didn't know how to answer that question. So he told him from the place where it's most that touched the side of the oven, where it became the most heated up, or the most made, the most, if you like, machelek afui biyoter. So and then yes, okay, if that's the case and you're that big, how did you fall to start dealing with avodah zarah and stuff? And then his final answer was, if you were back in my generation, you would pick up your dress and then run ahead of me and to go worship avodah zarah. So again, bringing back someone, that's the point. As if you're saying something in his name or mentioning him, gets to bring him back. I think it's a recurring theme.
Yep. Right. Okay.
Great.
This idea is actually used in a different context in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, where the discussion is about the question of Tchiyat HaMetim. Right? We know that's one of the one of the Ikarei Emunah, that we believe that there's going to be resurrection of the dead. But this was a point of contention between Chazal and the Tzdukim that lived in their day. So, Sha'alu Minin and Rabbi Gamliel. So they asked the apostates, or the heretics, asked Rabbi Gamliel, how do we know that one day Hashem will bring the dead back to life? So we tried to bring them a source both from Torah and Nevi'im and Ketuvim, but they didn't accept any of them. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Incha shochev im avotecha, v'kam. It says, Hashem said to Moshe, you will lie with your forefathers. And then it says, v'kam ha'am hazeh v'zana, that the nation after you die will stand up. But they say, v'kam, Moshe himself will get up again. Amar lo v'dilma v'kam ha'am hazeh v'zana. Maybe it's talking about the nation, not about him. Mina Nevi'im chtiv, okay, that source is less interesting for us. Mina chtuvim dichtiv v'chikech kiyen hatov holech dodi v'mesharim dovev siftei yishanim. Yet in Shir HaShirim it says dovev siftei yishanim, the lips of the ones who are asleep will move. So I have a source of Tchiat HaMetim in the Torah, but then the response of the Minim is v'dilma rechushe mecharshan siftatei be'alma. No, it just means that when after people are dead, that their lips can still move in the grave. Here it's quoted in the name of even somebody different. So basically, here it's used to, this teaching is used by the Minin as a support to refute Rabbi Gamliel's contention that there's Tchiat HaMetim. Okay, now I want to focus, and I don't know how much time you have, but I want to focus now on an interesting story. Okay, the Gemara Yavamot and Daf Tzadi Bet, it basically elaborates on this theme of what we saw in our Gemara and Bechorot about Rav Sheshet, who got angry that there wasn't a teaching in his name, and we'll see some of the Mefarshim on this story. Okay? Hazar Rabbi Elazar went, Amar Lishmata Be'emet Dusha. And he started teaching in the Beit Midrash. He was the student of Rabbi Yochanan, and he didn't say it in Rabbi Yochanan's name. This should sound familiar. It's the same beginning of a story as we saw with Rav Sheshet and Rav Idi. Shema Rabbi Yochanan ikpid. Rabbi Yochanan heard and got angry. Same deal. Ul legabe Rabbi Ami Rabbi Asi. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi went to visit Rabbi Yochanan. Amruleh, they said to him, Lo kach haya maaseh bebeit hakneset shel Tveria b'neger sheyesh b'rosho gelus Torah. That wasn't there a story one time in the shul in Tveria that they were discussing a knob, what is it? It's a bolt that has a knob on it, and it's a question of Shabbat and Muktzah. Shenechalku bo Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, that there was a machloket there about the halachic status of this knob. Ad shekar'u sefer Torah b'chamatan. They were so worked up in the course of their debate that they tore a sefer Torah in half. And then the Gemara interjects and says, "Karu sakadetach." You think they tore a sefer Torah? Ela ema shenikra sefer Torah b'chamatan. It's not that they actively went and tore a sefer Torah when they were upset, but they were so worked up in the course of their debate that it led to a sefer Torah inadvertently being torn out. V'haya sham Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. There's another rabbi there. Amar tamei ani im lo yeh beit hakneset hazu avodah zarah. He said, "I'd be surprised if this shul doesn't turn into a house of avodah zarah because of what's happened here." V'chein haven. That's actually what ended up happening. But what are Rabbi Asi and Rabbi Ami trying to do? They're saying to Rabbi Yochanan, you got upset that Rabbi Elazar taught something and you didn't quote it in your name, but look at how dangerous anger is, right? That's what they're coming to show from this story. Okay, Hadar ikpid tvei. And what did Rabbi Yochanan respond with? He got even more angry. And he said, Amar chavruta name. He said, are we now peers? Meaning, Rabbi Elazar was Rabbi Yochanan's student, right? So Rabbi Yochanan's upset that his student didn't quote something in his name. So he says, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, you're coming and telling me Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Elazar were arguing about something and they got so upset that look at the consequences. You're using that to give me musar, not to get upset. But he said, but they were colleagues. So now you're telling me that Rabbi Elazar is like my colleague? And it made him even more upset. Okay, so another rabbi came to visit him, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. Amarle, כאשר ציווה השם את משה עבדו, כן ציווה משה את יהושע, וכן עשה יהושע, לא הסיר דבר מכל אשר ציווה השם את משה. So he said in Sefer Yoshua, it says, just as Hashem commanded Moshe, so too Moshe commanded Yoshua, and so too Yoshua did. Yoshua did not deviate from anything Hashem commanded Moshe. Okay, and then Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi asks a question. וכי על כל דבר שאמר יהושע היה אומר להם, כך אמר למשה? did on every single thing that Yoshua said to Bnei Israel. He said, Moshe taught me XYZ, Moshe taught me XYZ. Of course not. Ella Yoshua Yoshev v'doresh stam. Yoshua would say and teach things. Everyone knew Yoshua was Moshe's student. So Yoshua didn't have to go every single time he said something and say, oh, Moshe taught me XYZ. He would teach, and people knew it was from Moshe. So, Af Rabbi Elazar Tamidcha Yoshev v'doresh stam. Hakol yodim ki shelchahi. So he's trying to calm Rabbi Yochanan down. He's saying, so too, when Rabbi Elazar goes to the Beit Midrash and says a teaching, and he doesn't say whose name it is, everyone knows that it's your teaching, because he's your student. So you don't have to, it's the same idea. Right? So, Amar Lahem, Rabbi Yochanan responded, Mipnei ma atem yodin lefayes kevin idi chaverin. So he says back to Rabbi Ami Rabbi Yassi, he says, how come you don't know how to appease somebody like our friend Ben Idi? In other words, he accepts Rabbi Yaakov Ben Idi's appeasement. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan, my time, but why did Rabbi Yochanan get so upset about this? Right? Etc. The same teaching that we saw before. Okay, so we have the same idea of the importance of Siftav, Dovot, Bechorot, etc. Why it's important to say things in people's names. But there's this interesting, kind of more elaborate opening of Rabbi Yochanan in Yevamot as compared to of Sheshet in Bechorot. Okay? The Yun Yaakov just clarifies some points in the story. Where it says Hadar ikpid tfei, it's on the fourth line on the right side. Hadar ikpid tfei amar chavruta nami. Rabbi Yochanan got even more upset and said, "Are we chavruta?" So efshar de mishum hachi ikpid alehem. So it's possible that Rabbi Yochanan got angry at Rabbi Abi and Rabbi Yassi from this. Shehen amru lo derech tochacha, because when they came and said, "Oh, the people in Tveria, they came and tore Sefer Torah in half." So they did it as a rebuke of Rabbi Yochanan, to say to him, you shouldn't be angry now, right? Anger is dangerous. Sheyesh onesh gadol leman deikpid, that there's a big punishment for someone who gets upset. Bevadai zehu dafka b'chavero davar she'eno agun chayav lehochicho kedita bivrachot uve'erchim. The reason Rabbi Yochanan got upset is, it's true if you see someone who's a colleague or a fellow doing something wrong, that you have an obligation to rebuke them. So he says, that's for sure true. And we learned it out in different sources. But if it's your rabbi who you see doing something wrong, you're not allowed to give your rav tochacha. Kedita b'Sanhedrin, right? In Sanhedrin, Linyan Aviv, etc. The kol sheken kvod rabo de'adif. And if you're talking about the honor of your rabbi, of course that's the most important thing. In other words, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi were students of Rabbi Yochanan also. So Rabbi Yochanan is sitting there. He's upset that one of his students didn't say a teaching in his name. Two other students come and give him musar. And he said that you're not supposed to do that. So that's why he got upset, because you're supposed to give musar to other people, but not to your rabbi. That's the Yun Yaakov's deal. Okay? That's why he said afterwards, I wish you guys knew how to appease like our friend Ben Idi, our colleague, right? That he went out of his way not to rebuke, but to say it, in a more, not to directly say like you shouldn't be angry, but to say it kind of akifin through the source from Yoshua. The Maharsha asks, I think, kind of a funny question, which I like the question. He says as follows: Devadai chavirim k'Rabbi Elazar v'Rabbi Yossi lo היה להם להתרגז בדבר ההלכה. Right, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yossi should not have gotten so upset about their discussion. Can I remember kama the Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel shechiba v'reut nagei zeh bezeh k'ayma shneimar hamet v'ashalom ehavu. It says in the beginning of Yevamot that Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, they loved each other, even though they disagreed very fundamentally on a lot of areas of halacha. On a personal level, they loved each other because that was the most important thing. Right, and two Talmid Chachamim who are respectful of each other, etc. Rabbi Elazar was the student of Rabbi Yochanan, not the colleague. He acted inappropriately, right, because he should have quoted his teacher. And Rav Yaakov Bar Idi's source was this idea from Yoshua. Yoshua heard it from Moshe, Moshe heard it from Hashem, etc. So the Maharsha asks, but how can Yaakov Ben Idi learn from Yoshua this idea that it's okay not to say something in the name of your Rav if everyone knows that it's your Rav. Right? Shelo haya lo mimi lekabel ela mimoshe. Because the Maharsha says, I would understand by Yoshua, if Yoshua says something stam, then everyone knows that it's Moshe, because there was no one else for him to have learned from. And Moshe was the first person to teach Torah, so of course Yoshua, he didn't have other sources that he could have possibly learned his Torah from. So of course it's fair for him to have taught stam, and then everyone to understand it came from Moshe. Right? So of course everything he says comes from Moshe. But after that, you can learn a teaching from anywhere. That's why you have to say something in the name of the person who said it. And who you got it from. Okay, and so that's the question of the Maharsha. The Maharsha says, Rav Yaakov Bar Idi says to Rabbi Yochanan, don't worry, because Yoshua said things stam, everyone knew it came from Moshe. Therefore, you, Rabbi Yochanan, you should be okay that Rabbi Elazar, your student, said stuff stam. But it's not the same, because Rabbi Elazar, it's true, maybe that he was a student of Rabbi Yochanan, but he could have heard particular teachings from other people also. And so, how does that help appease Rabbi Yochanan? That's the Maharsha's question. The Maharsha's answer is basically, it's true Yoshua couldn't have learned something from someone else, but it's possible he could have thought of it himself. And he could have come up with his own idea. But the chidush is that even though he could have in theory come up with it himself, if he said something stam, that the assumption is that he learned everything from his teacher Moshe. He didn't just come up with things on his own. And same thing with Rabbi Elazar, that he's your student, Rabbi Yochanan. That when he doesn't quote a name, it's obvious that he did it in the name of his rabbi. Mufak, right? His main Rav, Amro. He didn't come up with it himself. Because then he would have mentioned whose name it was in. Because all of his Torah comes from you. Okay, so that's the Maharsha kind of adding another layer of the question and answer to that. So yeah, I want to kind of conclude with the word that I alluded to in the beginning. And that is as follows. We talked before about the idea of legacy. And everything that we've learned about here is that if somebody teaches Torah and learns Torah and has students, and then they say things when they after they die, and say things after they die, then the teaching that is quoted in their name by the students has them live on. So the idea is that there's this teaching in Gemara and Shabbat. I should have brought it here actually, but on Daf Kuf Daled, that it talks about what's the difference between emet and sheker, truth and lie. So it says two things. It says number one, it says that the word emet, the letters of emet are spaced out throughout the alphabet. Aleph is all the way at the beginning, mem is right in the middle, and taf's at the end. As opposed to sheker, where they're all one next to the other. And the Torah says that's because emet is hard to find, and sheker is easy to find, because it's all clustered together, it's all very, and then emet, you have to go search for it. And the second thing it says is that kush takai shikor lokai, that truth stands and lies don't stand, because the letters of emet, if you envision the physical shape of the letters, they stand on a base, right?
They
if you have
a wide
aleph,
base or more than one leg, yeah.
Yeah, so an aleph can stand on two legs, the mem has a wide base, the taf has two legs, so they stand up. But sheker, all those letters, they have a point. The shin comes to a point, the kuf, it's disconnected, the resh would fall over. So truth stands and the lie doesn't stand. It's a beautiful, nice drasha. But the idea is that, right, that emet, that truth stands and it's hard to find. And so the idea is that Torah is often referred to as emet. Torah is referred to as truth. And we say, what about a life of Torah mitzvot gives you a legacy, makes things eternal? So one thing I'd like to suggest is that the word emet, right, the aleph bet, so if you say Torah is Taryag mitzvot, so you have the aleph is the first mitzvah, which is pru'avu, right, you have to have children. The taf is the last mitzvah, which is v'atakitvu lachem et hashira azot. In other words, limud and ktivat, it's engaging in Torah study. And the mem is everything in between, as it were, right, all the middle letters. So saying Torah is emet and comparing the Taryag mitzvot to the word emet, you have aleph, mem, and taf. And the idea that kush takai, that emet, that Torah, it makes your life, that the legacy are those things. That you have the taf at the end, which is Torah, And this is what we've just learned. Basically, what we spent the last half hour or so learning is about how being marbitz Torah and milamed Torah, that gives you a legacy after you die, right? You spend your life working, building up material possessions, etc. In the end, it's your students who teach things in your name. That's what will make you live on. Siftotav dovot b'kever. But it's also puruvu, which is the first mitzvah, right? That our children are our legacy. We live on through our children and pass on our values through them, and they are our legacy. And the Eitz Yosef here, I think, maybe alludes to that idea. He says as follows: Ma ikpid. Why did Rabbi Yochanan get so upset? So we saw the explanation of why Rabbi Yochanan got so upset in the Yun Yaakov, right? And also the Marsha. They offer reasons because it's a chavruta instead of a student, etc. But the Eitz Yosef says no, it's something different entirely. Why was he so upset? Al shelo amra mishmei, the feed Rabbi Yochanan azil below bar. Rabbi Yochanan did not have any sons. Kede amar Rabbi Yochanan, there's a different Gemara that says, din grama da asirei bir, that Rabbi Yochanan used to walk around with a necklace, and on the necklace he had a bone of his 10th son, because all of his children passed away. V'chol mi she'eno meniach ben nikra met, and anyone who does not have any son that lives is called himself dead. K'mamar Chazal, as Chazal say, Yoav shelo niach ben emar bo mita. So Yoav didn't have a son, so the word mita is applied to him. So anyone whose sons don't live, it's considered as though they themselves have died. Lachen ikpid, and that's why Rabbi Yochanan was makpid, right? Lememar shmate mishmei. At Rabbi Elazar, why didn't he say teaching in my name? Kadesh yusif totav dovבות, right? That his lips should speak in the grave, etc., etc. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan says, all I have is my Torah, right? I don't have a legacy of children who can outlive me, because they've all passed away. So that's why he was makpid, right? It was makpid because, like, if he had, specifically that was his legacy. He didn't have his children to have his legacy. So I love this Eitz Yosef because, number one, we saw that the story in Yevamot of Rabbi Yochanan is almost an identical story to the story of Rav Sheshet, right? It's a little bit more elaborate, but it's different rabbis, but it's the same core story with the same teaching of Sittatado B'Kever. But Eitz Yosef here is applying a personal, tragic aspect of Rabbi Yochanan, the person's life, onto the story and saying, okay, Rav Sheshet was makpid in Bechorot for whatever reason, but the reason Rabbi Yochanan was makpid was not as a chavruta student, maybe, but it's really because he was living with 10 sons, deaths on his head, and he wanted to ensure that at least his Torah would be transmitted properly in his name. Because if you talk about emet, what is our legacy? So you have puruvu, if you're zochet to have children, they're going to be a source of legacy. And you also have Torah, that can be a source of legacy. But for Rabbi Yochanan, who didn't have the aleph, he at least wanted to ensure the taf, perhaps. So yiratzon that we should be zochet to have a legacy both through our children, Bezat Hashem, and also through the Torah that we're able to be marbitz.
A few thoughts. Number one, you think of all the good times where Mishnah starts with a unnamed Tanakama, or on the other end when it says V'chachamim umrim. Again, not naming anyone specific. So if there is an idea to actually name names or say, who exactly said what, even saying, Bet Hillel Bet Shammai, what is it, naming someone specific from their houses, So again, I guess there is also, so you have also all those examples to kind of, to counter. So I guess that's number one. I guess it also connects with the last one that we spoke of is the quote. It's from the Torah. שם עולם אתן לו טוב מבנים ובנות. נתן להם בביתי ובחומותיי יד ושם. So as if there is, technically speaking, you would think there is something that's could be better than having kids, just in case that doesn't happen.
Right.
On the other hand, every time we say assume, we mention whom. Exactly, with all his kids, with all his kids, exactly.
Papa and his kids.
Exactly. So again, that's another thought.
They don't know the reference to the group.
At least one person.
Exactly. Yeah. So, just
Huh?
You don't